everyone, this is Elena, and I am with the Witch's Box here, and today we are going to be talking about Earth, Air, Fire, and Water by Scott Cunningham. And as many of you might know, Scott Cunningham has written extensively about witchcraft throughout the course of his life, and he was really, I think, most popular in the 80s and 90s. But he's still definitely a great fountain of wisdom and information to go to. So I get a lot of questions all the time from people who are beginning in witchcraft and don't know where to go and don't know where to find information. Scott Cunningham is a great place to start. This book is actually a continuation of one of his earlier books called Earth Power, which I also recommend and I will be talking about in another video at some point. But it's all about natural magic, elemental magic, and it's an interesting read for me now at this point in my craft because most of the time I really just follow the rhythms of the moon and how the moons travel through each of the different astrological signs and how that informs my magic. But this just keeps it down to the basics, to the elements and to the elemental influences and themes in whatever kind of spell you want to manifest or craft, which is interesting to me. I'm going to read really quick a little bio on Scott. Scott Cunningham was born in Royal Oak, Michigan on June 27, 1956. He learned about Wicca while still in high school and practiced elemental magic for 20 years. He experienced research, then wrote about what he learned in his magical training. Scott is credited with writing more than 30 books, both fiction and nonfiction. He passed from this incarnation on March 28, 1993, but his work and his words live on. Here's what I want to just really quickly point out. A lot of times I get asked, what do you do when you're starting out? What do you do as a beginning witch or baby witch? It's mentioned here in his bio, but it's really important that as you learn and as you progress, that you write everything down. Every single direct experience that you have from a meditation, from a spell, from a ritual, from a book that you're reading becomes the foundation for your practice and how you progress down your path. Witchcraft a lot of times is often about your direct experience. How you experience something. A spell that works for me may not work for you, either because you have more experience with one element as opposed to another, either because the elements involved, the tools involved, some people have more proficiency or more natural connection with certain tools than they do with others. And so writing things down is important. And this is what makes Scott Cunningham really special, is that he practiced for decades. He was an extensive practitioner and he studied himself. He studied his direct experience. He wrote things down. And so you get the benefit of that wisdom through the books that he wrote. I would say that this book is a perfect beginner book. If you're interested in elemental magic, you get a breakdown, the energetic breakdown of all the elements and the types of manifestations that make most sense using certain elements. You also get quite a bit of spells and rituals that he breaks down according to the different elements. And here's what I want to say about this, because I'm going to be reviewing quite a lot of books that provide a lot of rituals and a lot of spells. When I was reading this, there were some spells that just didn't make sense to me. And that wasn't necessarily a criticism about him. It's that the way I practice personally, some of these spells just didn't jive with the way I work with symbology, the way I have worked with the elements before, but they were really great examples of like an idea of, oh, I can take this spell and tweak it this way to make it work for me and the way I practice. And I think that that's advice that I'd give to anyone. You're gonna get a bunch of books on witchcraft that cover all sorts of rituals and all sorts of spells. You can change them, you can adapt them, you can play with them. If the book gives you a spell that just doesn't quite fit with your personality or just doesn't quite make things work the way you'd like them to, you can change it, you can experiment. And that's where writing things down comes in, and it's so important to say, hey, I did this spell, this is the formula I followed, and it didn't quite work the way I wanted, it didn't quite feel right, or it felt kind of off. I'm going to tweak a couple of things. And it's a great opportunity for you to dive into yourself and inquire within what would make it better. That really helps strengthen that intuitive muscle that is so important in our practice. That's what I wanted to say about this book. I take a lot of notes. I circled a lot of things, like, you got to outline, and a lot of great invocation rhymes that, you can use. A couple of spells that I hadn't thought of that I thought were fantastic. One of the things that I also love about this book is that he breaks down what a good spell requires. And I think that that's probably one of the most important parts of this book. He will tell you like the anatomy of a spell. He doesn't call it anatomy of a spell, that's my word. He breaks down what are all the important components to creating your own spell. That probably more than anything else in this book, even though the book is filled with a lot of great information, is probably one of the most important parts. It's important for all of us to know that we can create and formulate our own spells, and he breaks down what's needed and why it's needed so that you have at least a little bit of an outline of formula to follow when you create your own. I love that. The other thing he breaks down, he has a whole index of symbols for spells so that you can use these symbols and carving them in the sand, carving them in dirt, carving them into your candle so that you can do your spell work. So he talks a little bit about spells to help break addiction. And so this is like a symbol of alcoholism. He's got these symbols that give you an idea of what you can use in your own spell work if you use symbols or drawings on paper and other things. So I think that that's helpful. They're not universal symbols by any means, but they're symbols that he created for his own personal work, and he shares them here with us. And he goes into, for instance, if you're going to do a spell in alcoholism, this is just the page that I opened it up to. He talks about the stones, the herbs, the color of the candle that you can use, the type of ritual form that you can use, and the tools that you can use. And he does that for all things. He talks about protection spells for animals, protection spells for yourself, spells on how to pay your bills, spells for success in business. I think this is a great book for beginners, and even for those of us who have been in the craft for a long time. For me, it was definitely a refresher. It brought me back into this sweet spot with elemental magic and just bringing it down into the simple element, working with the power of elements. I think that even the act of meditating on each element on its own for a certain period of time can lend itself to a lot of transformation and wisdom. I really enjoyed this book. I think that it's definitely worth investing in. The book before this, which is Earth Power, is a great investment as well, because it both of them together will give you a pretty well-rounded foundation for elemental magic, natural magic. Here it is. This is the latest edition. It's gone through quite a few reprints, if I'm not mistaken. I'll link to it below so that if you want to buy it, you can. It was $14.99, but you can probably get it for a lot less on Amazon. But again, I'll link that down below. It's under the Wicca Witchcraft / folklore section. If you read it, if you have read it, let me know what you think. I'd love to have a conversation about it. There were a couple of rituals here. He talks a lot about mirror magic, which I love. It's one of my favorite forms of magic. Mirror magic, sand magic, sea magic, fire magic. So there's just a lot of information here. It's a really easy read. He has a lot of clarity in his writing, which I really enjoyed. It just flowed very naturally. And it just reminded me of when I was first investigating and learning about witchcraft, when I stumbled on one of his books. I really enjoyed them, and I haven't picked up a Scott Cunningham book in a very, very long time. So this was a sweet kind of throwback to back in the day for me, and I really became kind of sad that I hadn't been reading his stuff all along. All right, everyone, thanks for watching. If you have any comments, any questions, any suggestions on other books you'd like me to read, please go ahead and comment below, and I will see you next week.